Mother Knows Death presents External Exams with Nicole Angemi.
Hi everyone, welcome to Mother Knows Death. This week's episode, this external exam that we're doing is we're going to be talking about stalking. We talked last week about Taylor Swift's stalker in New York City, and I told you about a personal case that I know, a friend of mine named Amie Harwick, who was killed by a domestic violence situation and, of course, stalking. I first had met Amie back in 2016. She was here visiting Philly because she was from around this area with a friend of ours, Dr. Paul Kunaris. And we had texted back and forth a couple times. We were planning to meet up and everything once she came back to Philly to visit. And then I saw the terrible news one day that she was murdered. And I was just completely surprised. I texted Paul right away. And it just was really crazy. I knew this girl. She was beautiful, talented, smart. She just had the world going for her from my perspective. And I didn't know that she was battling all of this stuff behind closed doors. And we really just need to bring awareness to stalking and everything because it's just so important. And I'm going to read you some statistics of how it really impacts a lot of people's lives. And it's not just women. It is more women than men, but it happens to men too. So a publication by the Bureau of Justice reported in 2019 that 3.4 million people were victims of stalking, but only 29% of them had actually reported it to police. And of those reports, 67% of them said that they feared being killed or being physically harmed. And now in relation to stalking and how it goes along with domestic relationships, nationwide, 54% of female homicide victims reported stalking to police before they were killed by their partner. So that's something that we need to talk about because that's more than half of the people that were killed had stalking involved in their case. Amie was killed on Valentine's Day night of 2020. So I thought since we were approaching the 4-year anniversary of her death, she was a huge fan of my work. And I think that she would almost be honored that we were talking about her to try to bring awareness to a situation. And today we're going to talk to Amie's best friend so we can get an outside perspective of what it's like having a great friendship, a relationship, a family member, someone that you love and that you're close to who's going through this and what it's like to go through it and maybe some of the warning signs that you would see. So please welcome Amie's best friend, Robert Coshland, to the show. Hi, Robert. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Okay, Robert, so tell us a little bit about Amie and why she was so special.
Well, Amie is a one in a million kind of person. And, sometimes when you meet a person like Amie, you're just floored by how kind of like intense they are and in such a positive way. Like she was the person that when she walked in the room, everyone would be so excited because Amie was here. She was just a happy, as I said, positive kind of presence in the room. But at the same time, she was super smart. She was super funny, and she was the kind of person that just would not hesitate to help you specifically in your career. So she was all about helping women further their careers, their education. So if you were talking to her, especially if you're a woman, and you're like, oh, I'm thinking of doing this or I'm thinking of doing that, she would be like, oh, you definitely have to do that. And I'm going to connect you with someone I know over there. And, let me know how it goes. I'm going to check in on you. And she just was the most supportive person to her friends and even to people she just met as, strangers, because she was just really interested in seeing other people succeed. And I think because of that, that lifted her up too. So everyone just loved her. She was just, she was beloved by friends and strangers alike. Anyone who met her was like, oh my God, my friend Amie, you met her, you were friends. And that's how it was. And, she was my best friend and she was a lot of people's best friends. So she was close to a lot of people. And But for me, she was somebody that like I talked to all the time. She knew everything about me. We were together quite a lot. And yeah, she was a force of nature to be reckoned with. And if there was an obstacle, she could climb over that obstacle. She was great at just dealing with problems, even though it might stress her out, but turning those problems into opportunities.
How old was she when she died?
She was 38. She would have been 39 in April.
And she wasn't, so she died in California. She wasn't originally from California, correct? She was from around my area.
Yeah, she was from Lansdale, Pennsylvania, which is north of Philadelphia, like an hour. And I'm from that general vicinity too. We didn't know each other there. We met in California though.
Do you know why she moved to California?
She met a guy in the band. His name was Tommy, and they dated. And then he's like, "Come to California and let's get married." And they got married, and she came out to California. They had the marriage in California, which I only lately heard that there was like a monkey at the wedding and stuff like that. I was like, well, that sounds appropriate. But like, this was like 2001 or 2000 or something like that.
And how did you meet Amie?
I met Amie at a party. It was a pool party, and I was taking photographs of it. Like sometimes I'll bring my camera to parties, and I do a lot of photography. So I'll shoot some photos. I hadn't gone in the pool yet, but a lot of people were in the pool. I walked into the kitchen, and she was in the kitchen in a bikini, and I was like, "Oh, hey!" And it was just the two of us. So we started talking. And she asked me if I did photography, and she said she did some modeling. And I was like, "Oh, are you going to go in the pool with a minute?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm just stopping by. I'm on my way to work." I was like, what? I was like, "What kind of work do you do?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm a go-go dancer, and I just want to come by and say hello to some people. And I'm leaving for work. It was like midnight. She was on her way to work in a bikini." So we connected on Facebook, I think, and then we messaged a bit. And I guess I invited her to a Christmas party I had, and she responded via text. This is the first text I had from her. And I have all of the texts that she and I exchanged. I have over 26,000 texts that we exchanged. And her first message was like, "I can't come to your party." And my response was, who is this? So a couple months later, we did a photo shoot together. She came over to my house, and that's when we became really good friends. She brought a taxidermied wolf head with her, and I shot her in my house. And then when I walked her out to her car, she had this like taxidermied coconut crab in the back window of her car, which is a huge crab. I mean, it's like 18 inches in diameter, I'd say. I was like, "Oh my God, you've got a coconut crab." She's like, "Yeah, I think because it's been in the car, the sun's been wearing down on it. I think it's like kind of disassembling." But I was just like, "Oh my God, you're amazing. We need to be friends." So that's kind of when our friendship really took off. And that was in 2013, beginning of 2013.
Okay, so you said, I had read on one of your Instagram posts that you guys were such good friends that you texted all day, and you said sometimes you even talked to her more than you were talking to your wife at the time.
Oh yeah, that was later. I mean, in the beginning, when I first became friends with her, I'd see her maybe once a month or something like that. And we messaged, because it's like when you first meet people, and she had a lot of people vying for her attention, and she gave everyone her attention. Maybe also people that, were not as good for her, but she was one of those. She had a bit of a people pleaser aspect in the very beginning when I first met her. That changed over time. But in the last years, like 2018, 19, 2020, we messaged every day. I talked to her at least once a day on the phone, and I saw her sometimes. Like in 2019, I saw her a couple times a week. In 2020, I'd go over her house, or she'd stop by my house, sometimes just for like a few minutes or whatever, but we got together quite frequently, as many as like 5 times a week. So
The man that killed Amie, his name was Gareth Pursehouse. When did you first hear of his name from Amie?
I think she mentioned him first to me around 2014. she didn't really talk much about her past. And it was like over time that I'd learned things about her. So she'd always be pulling things out. I'd be like, wait, what? And then she'd tell me this thing. So she had so much in her past, but she was always very focused on the present and the future. But she had mentioned that she had an abusive boyfriend, and she had told me once, for example, they had gotten in a fight, and he hit her, and she called the police. When the police came, he convinced them to arrest her and said that she had attacked him. And she ended up spending the night in jail. And before, the police, after further questioning, decided actually he was the problem, and then they picked him up instead. She had told me that story once, but she didn't tell me that there was an ongoing situation until 2014. She'd gone on a trip. And when she came back, she called me and she's like, I think, Gareth has broken into my house and stolen all my photo albums and turned some things upside down and stuff. And he also erased my computer. And I was like, well, turn on your computer, tell me what you see. And in fact, yeah, her computer didn't even have an operating system on it, didn't even have Windows on it anymore. It was just so I was like, well, that does not normally happen just overnight, accidentally. So I came over and, looked around, and I told her she should get a webcam and stuff. But she filed a police report about it. And then we went to lunch, and then she told me about other things that had happened with Gareth and kind of gave me a lot of the big rundown of her concerns about him and his ongoing obsession with her, that he had gotten her kicked off of jobs. So she had applied to be a family counselor at a prison. And she was in the final stages of interviews, and he had been hacking into her email. I think when they were together, he had access to her computers and probably installed software on her computer and phone that he was able to kind of monitor what was going on, because she felt like he was monitoring her. And he sent nude photos of her to the prison, that, person that was the hiring person. And they ended up denying the job. So she was really upset about that. But what she was able to do is really turn that around. So she had this job opportunity where she would have gone to literally work at a prison somewhere in Nowheresville, California. And if she'd taken that course of action, we all probably wouldn't know the Amie that we know today. I probably would not have met her. I think, all the things and wild things and interesting things she did probably would not have happened so much. She would have just been in a small town, working at the prison, counseling families, which I think she would have found very satisfying. But because of what happened, and the photos he sent were from Playboy, actually, she was really angry that, because she had posed nude, somehow this was something that would affect how she could perform in her job at, the prison. And she also recognized that this is a problem that a lot of women have, that they're judged based on their sexuality or if they were nude. And it's, she's like, this is really stupid. I don't think that this is something that should happen. So she decided to devote her work towards helping sex workers and people who have issues with things like that cope with dealing with being in a society where women are often judged just because of their sexuality. So that's when she decided, because of what he did, to go get a doctorate in human sexuality. So it kind of this very upsetting thing that happened, really, she was able to turn into this course correction that really set the stage for all of the success she had later in life.
So that was probably really fueling his fire as well, because he was trying to ruin her and kind of beat her down, and instead he enhanced her even more than she was before.
Yes, every time he'd do something, she would be better on the other side. Even now, he's killed her, and which is the most he can do. He's gone to jail, and everyone's still talking about Amie.
Yeah, exactly.
She's not able to do all the great things that she was probably going to do, but we're still talking about her.
Did she ever say because she was dating him prior to even meeting you, so you weren't really, like, around while they were currently dating, but did she say that she loved him at all at any point, or was it more of just she was it's kinda scared to get away from him because of the way that he was acting?
Yeah, so when I met her, which was in 2012, and then later we shot photos in 2013, I think she had just broken up with him just before I met her. So it was like a very close add-on, but she didn't talk about him until 2014 to me. She did tell me that in the beginning she did love him, but he became very controlling and very, physically abusive eventually, and then it was a question of being afraid of him, but she still did love him, and that she thought that he would change because after a bad episode, he would become super sweet and apologetic and do all these nice things. And that's a pretty classic abuser action. They're horrible selves. And then because they're narcissists typically, they then do all the work to win you back and convince you they're not going to be that way again until the next time. And that's that cycle. And people get addicted to the good times and think that bad time is just a blip. And, we can have these good times again if only I do this or only I stop doing that or whatever. And that's how the control starts to happen. If I stop talking to my friends or what have you. And then things are good until there's some new infraction. And this is how people stay in these relationships, and ultimately how often people do get injured or killed.
I have a friend who was in a relationship that they would get into really bad fights, and then they would start pushing each other around, and they'd have to call the cops, and it was always getting like that multiple times. But as her friend, I did tell her, you got to get away from this because this isn't normal. But at the same time, I never had a feeling that guy was going to kill her. I just thought like they were just getting a little passionate during their fights. It happens to some people, whatever. I never feared like he was like weird and was pushing it beyond the point of within this normal range of fighting or whatever. When do you think that happened for her, that she became she was an abused girlfriend to being like scared and thinking this guy's going to try to hurt me, just thinking that he was acting weird? Like, what would make her think that when she came into her apartment, he was definitely the one that broke in and did this stuff to her?
Well, I knew that she told me that he was obsessed with her, and, we continued to like try to message her or contact her or leave notes or whatever. I don't know that she ever thought that he would kill her. And I think that in general, we just don't, that's outside of our imagination, because that doesn't happen to us. It doesn't happen to our friends. It doesn't happen to people we know. It happens on TV. It happens on shows. And it's just so, we don't think the way someone who kills somebody is thinking. And, maybe they think that way all the time. And maybe it's just like, they just gear up and do it. But I knew that she was afraid that he might hurt her. I don't know when that happened. I think when he broke into her apartment and did those things, which she assumed it was him just because of the weird nature of what happened, all her photo albums being taken and her computer being erased. I think she always described him as this like brilliant hacker. I don't really think that he was a brilliant hacker, but he was a programmer, and he knew how to get some software, but any programmer could do that. But he going into her house, I think that's the first time she really started to worry about him. But then after that, things settled down. She got a new computer, she got a new phone, and I was like, he can't be hacking into your new computer or your phone. He has no access to it. So changed the locks on her door, but he could pick locks, but she was always a little nervous about that. So, so I don't know at what point she was worried about him, but I think it started when he broke into her place. But then there were many years in the intervening years before she ran into him, and then what happened, that he was probably behind a lot of online posts on these gossip websites and so forth. But there was a second person that was also stalking her, which was an ex girlfriend. And this person and Gareth often would team up and talk about harassing her. So it's hard to say if he was the one doing it or if it was this woman who was doing it, who came out, by the way, after she was murdered and gave an interview to the newspaper. And I was like, I cannot believe this person is giving an interview, to try and like bank off of Amie's name in some way or just get her name out there. But even in the interview, she had to explain why Amie had a restraining order against her. So she's like, oh, it was just a misunderstanding. And I actually went to court with her to get the restraining order. And this woman brought a lawyer and all this stuff. And Amie did not. And Amie actually prevailed in that case because it was so egregious. So
at what point at this point when she told you that he had broken into her house and you were pretty convinced that it was him as well, was there a point where you started getting scared for her and thinking like this is a little beyond the normal way people act when they're upset when people break up?
Oh, absolutely. It was at that breakup or at that break-in, I was absolutely afraid for her. And I talked to her about it that day when we had lunch afterwards. And I asked her, what, we should do something. And she's like, well, I don't have any actual proof. And she did file a police report indicating she thought it was him, but like she didn't have any actual specific proof that it was him. And I have to admit, when she called me and told me all this stuff, I was skeptical. I was like, really? Like this.
Who would do that?
Yeah. So when I came over, then I was like, oh, this is a true story here. This is not, because again, we were friends, but like, we're just starting to become, get to know people. And sometimes you think, oh, someone's exaggerating or whatever. But once I was over there, I was like, okay, I get this. And she was like, yeah, look at all the things that were turned upside down in the house and stuff. It was like just weird and creepy, just kind of like him letting her know he was there. And I think to kind of rattle her.
Now, prior to this, she did have a restraining order against him, correct?
Yeah, she had one restraining order and then she filed for a second one, but she didn't end up following through with the second one.
Do you know why she didn't follow through with the second one?
I don't know specifically. She had a bunch of files. I saw the files that she had, but I think the second one, she'd filed a restraining order once. I actually don't know the combination of things, but she filed a restraining order after he like beat her up one time, and she had a black eye and stuff. And then there was another time where the police came out and she had filed it, but then she had to go to court. And I think she was too scared to see him. I think that she just didn't want to like deal. Like she was very scared of him at the end of their relationship. And I think the thought of having to go to court to face him was just too much for her emotionally at the time. And that's something that's hard for people that are in these situations. To file a restraining order and to get one, you have to go through quite a lot of misery. This person that you're going to try and get a restraining order against, they have free reign to kind of like just make you miserable, like just go after you and all these things. And then once it's reached a certain point, now you have to go to court and convince the court to get a restraining order. They don't get punished for all the things they did to you already. And basically the court's just like, oh, hey, stop doing this. Or we might arrest you. But a lot of times people who are abusive will just skirt the edge of what they are allowed to do. I saw a case, 48 Hours has done a number of shows about Amie, and the first one they have one coming out on the 10th, this Saturday, February. The first episode, they had some interviews with other people with restraining orders, and like the restraining orders, like you had to stay like 100 feet away, and this person would be like 105 feet from them all the time, just skirting the rule. And that's okay because it's technically okay, but it's obviously not okay.
Yeah, it's the laws, especially when this happened to Amie, all of this stuff that comes out, that restraining orders expire and all the trouble you have to go through. I personally think if someone's harassing me, why can't I just go to police and say, can you please make sure that they stay away from me? Why do I have to give proof even if I feel scared?
Yeah, well, because, obviously people can also abuse that.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
So it's hard. I had a situation myself in 2021 where I had to file for a restraining order against a woman, and I didn't get it. And I think the judge, we went to court and everything, and the judge, who's probably been on the bench for a long time and seen a lot of men beat up women. And here I am trying to get a restraining order against a woman. And who's very beautiful and articulate and so forth, and has her lawyers and everything. And I think he had one look at it and he's kind of like, oh, this pretty thing is causing you trouble. Like, I don't see this. And he basically said, I don't see a need for this. I was trying to explain my case and I had witnesses. He's like, I don't think we need any witnesses, and just hurry up and tell me what it is. Like it was so decided. Like I barely was able to get out the story, couldn't bring any witnesses. And then like, he was like, not going to give it. And fortunately for me, she stopped, because I think restraining orders are effective for people who have something to lose. And for people who, like Gareth, who he's, doesn't have a lot of friends and he's on the outskirts a little bit, like they don't, it's already illegal to hurt someone or murder them, right? So having a restraining order, it's for people that have something to lose, that it's going to really actually work.
Yeah.
And that's
exactly. So this break-in she had, you said, was around 2014?
I think so.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden she didn't really hear from him, anything about him, for years, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And during that time, was it something that you just both of you just kind of forgot about and thought it was finally over with?
I didn't forget about it because of the online harassment that was still happening and the stuff that was being posted. She believed a lot of it was this woman, but she also thought that it could be Gareth too. So it still would come up, and it was causing her trouble, especially when she got with Drew Carey. There was like kind of an uptick in posting because suddenly her profile was high again and she was in the public eye and on TV and stuff. So, and she was on TV even before Drew, but there was more in the media about her and their relationship. And there was big uptick, and Drew tried to have an attorney stop some of the stuff, but because of the way the internet's regulated, you can't. Basically websites say like, well, we're not responsible for what people post, and that's our policy. So you go deal with the people, but the people are anonymous and you can't find out who they are. So at the end of the day, like, they couldn't do anything, even with all his attorneys and stuff.
Yeah, which is scary. And that's another point that I have, is that she had a little bit more resources than the average woman does. Same with Taylor Swift, and they still can't make these people stop harassing them and stalking them, it just doesn't say much for any person that's going through this, that there's almost nothing you can do about it.
That's the part that I think, that's the part of the story about Amie that really resonates with people, and why this story has touched a lot of people, because here's a woman who had everything. She had money and fame. She was trained in these things. She counseled other people about domestic violence. She helped a lot of people through this. She knew all the things you were supposed to do, and she did all the things right. And this still happened to her. And I think that's what hits home for a lot of people who are just in some small town somewhere that's going through a situation that makes it just all the more real. Because if it can happen to her, it can definitely happen to anyone. And that is very sobering.
Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by The Gross Room. Starting on February 9th to February 23rd, The Gross Room will be on sale for only $20 for the entire year of Gross. You will have access to celebrity death dissections, high-profile death dissections, thousands of videos, photos, articles, all the way dating back to 2019. You definitely need to join this Valentine's Day. Please go to thegrossroom.com for more info and sign up. So she hasn't heard from him for years, and then all of a sudden, about a month before her death, she goes to an award show and she runs into him there. She didn't know he was going to be there. He just so happened to be a photographer that was there at the same time. What did she tell you about that interaction with him?
So the next day after the show, I texted her and I said, how was the show? This show, by the way, she went to is impromptu. She wasn't planning on going. At the last minute, someone invited her to go. And she's like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to the show. So I texted her. I said, how was the show? And she said, I have to call you. So she called me because now she was worried that he was monitoring her text messages and phone again. And she's like, I ran into Gareth. I saw him. I thought he maybe wouldn't recognize me or not see me because she was walking the red carpet and he was a photographer. But he basically just went nuts. He like ran over her, was like screaming at the top of his lungs, like, "You ruined my life, you bitch," and all these things in the middle of a room full of like hundreds of people. And then like fell on the ground crying and was in the fetal position. And she's like, she was really scared by it because it just showed how obsessive he was. And he was reciting texts that they had sent each other, like, years before, like verbatim texts. He's like, "Well, you said blah, 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 blah." And she's just like, this is not healthy. So she went into kind of like counselor mode. And she's like, "I've got to de-escalate the situation. I need to calm him down. I need to get him to, stop being, emotional right now, because, well, I think it was embarrassing to her, but also terrifying to her, because here's a person who hasn't moved on." She's like, "Hey, it's been 8 years. Like, why don't you, go meet other people? Like, I do not want to be with you. We cannot be together, and you need to live your life. I'm living my life, and, trying to like be the Amie that everyone knew, like, be kind, firm, and, kind of let him down." She was terrified of him, but she wanted to be in control and de-escalate the situation and kindly, let him off. And I think, I've read different thoughts on that approach, because in some cases I've read that when this happens, and if you're nice to the person who's like being terrible to you, like it creates this opening where they think they have an opportunity again. Because it's like, "Oh, you're being kind and nice and gentle with me in my thing. And, maybe like you will get back with me." And it may, especially if they're delusional as he was, so it's hard to say, but she automatically went to that place, which is how she was. She was someone who would comfort you if you were going through a crisis. And eventually, they parted ways. But after that, she started receiving phone messages. There were flowers left in front of her door, like soon after that. So she was terrified. I told her that she needed to get a gun, because like you just don't know. She ended up buying. She said she would consider it. She didn't do it. She bought pepper spray, which was still in its unopened Amazon package on the day she was killed. But even so, you just, with what happened, you're not going to be armed all the time or carrying something in your hand at every moment when, So it's hard. I don't think there was much that could have been done in that situation. Anyway, I asked her if she, could get a restraining order, and she's like, no, because like he didn't threaten me. All he did was cry on the floor, and that's not in any way going to allow me to get a new restraining order. And that's what I think needs to change about restraining orders. I think you should be able to renew them. I think you should be able to, something happens and it's automatically restored, like probation type of situation. I don't think they need to last forever, because there are people that do stop. But I think you need to be able to reactivate them right away. Would that have helped her? I don't know. We can't say with any certainty, but that's something that I think could have happened.
So when she went home the next day, she wrote herself an email.
Yes.
Can you tell us about what she wrote in that email?
Yes, she, in her email, basically that she wrote to herself, she talked about running into Gareth and the things that he was doing. She didn't write everything, but she did tell me stuff that was not in the email. But it was it was a pretty good overview of his behavior and the things he said to her and how scared she was. I mean, she basically said that she was scared. And I think that she had written that email to herself as the basis for building a new case to get a new restraining order, because that's the kind of thing you need to do. To get a restraining order, they don't take your word. They want to see evidence. So having pre-written emails from a time, prior to when you're getting the restraining order starts to establish a timeline and so forth. So I think she wrote that as insurance to establish her feelings so that she could get a restraining order in the future. I'm assuming that, because I didn't know she wrote an email until I found it after her death.
So what happened after that? Like they were broken up for so many years that he didn't know where she lived, and he didn't have her new phone number and all this stuff, assuming. So how was he able to get a hold of her after he saw her?
Well, Unfortunately, in this day and age, finding out people's personal information is incredibly easy. Unless you are completely disconnected from the internet, it's so easy for you to find out where someone lives. I mean, she bought a house, which was in her name, so it's a public record. So basically, you can pay a website $40 and they'll give you every file that exists on you. So I think, and also for her business, her phone number is on her website. So this is the problem with our connected age. It is very hard to escape a stalker without changing your identity and, not being who you are, which people obviously don't want to do too. So he found out, but I think that's Google.
And did she tell you that he was continuing to contact her?
Yeah, she mentioned flowers on the door and he texted her and that she blocked him. But then there was no additional communication because now he didn't have a way of communicating to her.
And at that time, do you have like a group of friends that know about this, or was it strictly just you that she was talking to about this?
Oh no, she told everybody. She told absolutely everyone.
So at that time, did you guys all get together or even just talk to each other and say, hey, like something's really not right here. This is really scary?
We talked, I think when I talked to other friends or mutual friends, we definitely talked about it. I don't think that we saw it as abnormally scary. I think we were worried about it. Yeah, I guess we were worried about it because he'd been gone for so long, was acting so weird. I think we thought it was weird, but again, no one thought it would happen. What would happen, it would end up happening. That was outside the realm of consideration. We never talked about like, oh, he's going to like hide her house or kill her. That just seemed just impossible.
Okay, so a month after this encounter that she had with Gareth, it's Valentine's Day night and she goes out with her friends. Can you tell us about the last time you heard from her that day?
Yeah, I talked to her around 1 p.m. on Valentine's Day. My second wife was with her that morning. They had spent the morning together and gone to breakfast and hung out. And she had just left and was driving home to my house. And I called Amie, or Amie called me, and we just said, Happy Valentine's Day. I love you. I love you. And that was, the extent of it. She told me she was going out that night to a burlesque show, but that was our last communication. So, the last words I said to her and the last words she said to me were, I love you, which, I guess is the best we can hope for.
Yeah, that it is. It's so sad to hear what happens next. So she goes out with her friends to a burlesque show. She comes home and Gareth is in her apartment waiting for her. She doesn't know it, obviously. And he murders her. When did you first hear that something happened to her?
So when I woke up the next day, which was a Sunday, I think, I noticed I had a whole bunch of text messages from her roommate, Mike Herman, and a bunch of missed calls, including from the police. And I was like, well, this is weird. So I looked at the texts and Mike said, Amie was assaulted last night. I'm at the police station. They want to talk with you too. And so I was like, well, I was upset, but like, I didn't know what assaulted mean. I didn't know if like while she was out at the burlesque thing, something happened on the street or she got robbed or mugged or beat up, or I know it, like no information. So I called the number that was on to the police and they said, hey, can you come down to Hollywood Station this morning? And I said, okay. But they didn't really let on to anything. So I wasn't like, I finished breakfast, I got dressed and I went down there and I wasn't thinking, how absolutely terrible the situation would be. And I asked, I did ask them where Amie was and they said she was in the hospital because I checked her phone location. She and I started sharing locations on the day of the awards, the day after the awards thing, when she told me she ran into Gareth. She had told me on that day, hey, if anything happens to me, it's him. And I said, let's share our phone location so I can see where you are. So we started doing it that day. So I checked her location now after talking to the police to come down to the station, and it said it was in her house. I was like, well, that's weird. So then I'm like, is her phone? They told me she was in the hospital. So I was like, well, I guess her phone's still there. So then I was like, I didn't know what to make of any of it. So then I went to the police station, and then they started asking me questions, saying that she had been injured and was in the hospital, and if I knew who could have, or who could have done this. And, I really didn't know if, someone just broke in or what happened, or I didn't know. They didn't give me any information. But I did say there is one person that she said, if anything happens to me, it's him. And it's this ex-boyfriend she recently ran into. So I gave them his name. I only knew his name as Gareth. I didn't know his last name at all. She'd only talked to him about him as Gareth. Didn't know his name. Weirdly, he and I worked like next door to each other for a time. So but I didn't know this because I didn't even know what he looked like. So I contacted a mutual friend of ours. Her name's Marcy. I knew Marcy knew Gareth, when they were dating. I knew that. So I said, hey, what's Gareth's last name? She sent it to me. I gave it to the police, and that's how they got his name to start looking into him.
That's interesting. So you're at the police station and they didn't really give you any details about what happened. So maybe if you had heard exactly the circumstance, you would have been more like, okay, it was definitely this.
Well, when they're investigating, I mean, they don't know.
Yeah.
I'm a suspect. Everyone's a suspect.
Yeah.
Right? So they told me all that, and then they said, okay, go sit out in the lobby. And Mike was there, a roommate was there, and he was very agitated, very upset. And I was like, what happened? And he just kept saying it's really bad. It's really bad. It's really bad. But like, he didn't tell me anything either. He was just so like beside himself. So then the police called us back into the room together, and they said, we have some really bad news, and that Amie passed away. And they told us that together. And then when I was leaving, they gave me their cards, and then I noticed that I was talking to homicide. So, but they knew already that she died hours before my interview, but they told us post-interview that she had died.
Yeah, that I was going to say, because I thought that she just died a couple hours within getting to the hospital. So your friend that was there, that was her roommate,
Yes.
he found her, right? Like that. Is that why he was saying she was really bad?
Well, I mean, he saw her on the ground. I mean, he was there when it was happening. So, and and he had gone to get help and so forth. So, but then he saw her on the ground. So that's when he, I guess made his evaluation.
Yeah. And that's why he was so traumatized and couldn't really speak about it, because he just was so shocked. And
yeah, I mean, and it was an alarming scene. I mean, in the trial of Gareth, I mean, they showed the body cam and stuff, and you can see her on the ground. It's pretty disturbing. So,
and I know that she was engaged to Drew Carey, and they had some kind of a call or a text that they were going to get together to try to start talking again or become friends again. So clearly they were on pretty good terms. Who told him about what happened to her?
Well, so I'm going to back up and just talk about them getting back together and being on good terms. They had just started to like reconnect. They had their breakup, and they weren't on terrible terms. I think they really both still loved each other, but it just wasn't working out. But then they weren't talking too much. And then this reconnection meeting, interestingly, she didn't tell me about it because her other friends were like, oh yeah, she was doing it, but she wouldn't tell you because you would try and talk her out of it. And I love Drew. Like, he's great, but like, she would always get back with people that she broke up with. And I was always trying to talk her out of doing that. I'm like, you already went through this and you know why you broke up. You need to, stay broken up. But I did like Drew. He was great. I always said he was the best person that she dated that I met. So she hadn't told me. So I only found that out later. I was like, oh, interesting. I mean, that sounds accurate. But after I left the police station, I told Marcy. The police told me not to let it go too far because they wanted to tell her parents in person, and they were going to send police to tell her parents. And I gave them her parents' information, but her parents were not home at the time. They were at her brother's house, house sitting. So they couldn't find her parents for a while. So they said, until her parents are informed, don't post about it online or whatever. So I started calling people, and I told everyone just to keep it on the DL for now. I told Marcy first because she's the one that gave me Gareth's information. And then after that, I kind of went down all her close friends, including Drew. So I'm the one that called Drew and told him. So, and everyone's reaction was universally just disbelief and everyone was extremely upset. But I made that call. I made that call 30 times probably. And, it never got easier. And if people were driving, I'm like, you need to pull over your car and stop before we talk. And they're like, no, why? No, I'm like, no, do that. So they would do that. And I tell them, and then, they would have pretty significant, severe emotional reactions because it's huge and horrible and unbelievable.
And did most people you knew that were close with her, that knew the whole situation with Gareth, was everybody just like, we know it's him?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, everybody was absolutely positive it was him.
And how long after you found out about her murder were you made aware that Gareth was arrested?
Well, I was in contact with the police, so it was pretty soon. I think it was like the next day. They told me it was soon after it happened. So I was talking to the police constantly. So I had gone to do my interview, but then I was sending information to them because people had different, bits of data that I thought would be useful. Because again, we didn't know for sure it was Gareth, but we were just sending more information, including I was put in contact through a mutual friend of a woman who was supposed to go on a date with Gareth because we were just talking about it being Gareth. And by the way, this was all after, once her parents were informed, soon thereafter TMZ broke the news. I had a bunch of people over my house and we were just talking about it. And then it was like everywhere.
And how did they finally get a hold of her parents?
I don't exactly know. They had phone calls and stuff, but they eventually met up with their parents. I feel like it was late, like 11 p.m. at night.
Oh God.
By the time that they gave them the information. So after that, we let more people know about it. And then someone came forward to say that they were supposed to go on a date with Gareth that night. And he had been texting them before and after what happened. And so, I put them in contact, and they ended up ultimately testifying in court about that. But everyone who had information, anyone who knew Gareth, anyone who knew anything that she had said about it, or anyone who had been at the awards ceremony there too, I was putting in contact with the police. And so I was in contact with them constantly, which is how they told me soon after.
And did you have to testify in court because you knew so much information?
I did testify in court, but my testimony was pretty limited, and it was limited to the email I found on her on Gmail to herself about being afraid of Gareth, which was apparently a pretty instrumental piece of evidence about her state of mind. Because at one point, the defense was saying that she wanted to meet up with him. At the preliminary hearing, they change the theory all the time as to what happened, but preliminary hearing, they implied that she invited him over to hang out, and she wanted to meet up with him, and this was a whole arranged situation. But when I found that email, that pretty much blew that story out of the water, and then they had a new story, and then a new story, and then ultimately they didn't even offer a defense in court. When they were called to present their defense, they just rested, which was
I was just going to say, who cares? If she said, come over, let's talk and make up, who cares? I mean, he killed her still.
I think they were looking for a way to say it wasn't premeditated, and probably we're going to say that she started it and it was an accident. Who knows? I don't know what their line, but that's the most likely line.
So I know that you have said that you were shocked that they didn't really present anything. I mean, really, what could they have? What were they going to present? There was so much evidence against him, but he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So now he's sentenced and everything. Has he ever admitted to killing her or ever expressed any remorse for his actions?
No.
Why do you think that is? Like, what does he have to lose at this point? He just doesn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's not a good person. I think he is a selfish narcissist, and I think that he probably, in his mind, feels like this was a justified action. I think that he's just not a good person.
If you talk to any person, if you're just sitting around the dinner table talking about the death penalty and everything, I think every single person has an opinion. They're for it, they're against it, or whatever. Until it actually happens to them that one of their close family members or friends are killed in such a heinous way. Has this experience changed the way you think about that? Are you satisfied with his conviction of life in prison without the possibility of parole, or would you be okay if he had the death penalty too?
Well, I live in California, and in California, the death penalty allegedly exists, but it's not real. Someone who gets sentenced to death in California, which I don't think has happened in a long time, never get put to death. I don't know when the last time they did it was, the 70s maybe. So in California, the death penalty is basically the same as life in prison without parole, except it actually ends up costing more because they go through all these appeals and so forth. So in California, life in prison without parole is the best you can get in terms of a punishment, which I accept. If the death penalty here was more like, say, Florida or Alabama or whatever, where they do it pretty fast, I would have gone for that, and I would absolutely support this. And I actually got in an argument with someone I met at a party who's actually a death penalty, an advocate for people who are on death row to stop them from being executed. I got in a huge argument with her, but in no way did it change my position. I think that, sometimes some people just don't need to be part of our society, and I don't see any reason for us to just have them in a cell forever because, society is done with them. They've basically invalidated their permission to be part of this world. And so I support the death penalty if it actually was
worked
real.
How it should. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's some countries where you get sentenced to death, they take you out of the court and shoot you. I don't believe in that. That does happen. I believe that if there is a death penalty, there should be an appeal phase. And certainly people who are not guilty get sentenced to death sometimes. But there are some times where it's just, there's no question.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think a lot of times people will say that they're human and they don't deserve this, but I think about the victims all the time and how horrible. It's not even just Amie. It's you guys. It's her parents. It's everyone that knew her. It affected, and to think how she was terrorized for years. I mean, she was so young when she died, and years of her life where she was scared of someone. Why does he deserve to live and she didn't? It's just not. It's not fair. I know that a lot of yourself and some of her friends are putting together, they're trying to bring changes in, maybe through Congress with the criminal justice system, to try to change some of these rules that have to do with stalking and have to do with restraining orders and things like that. Were you involved with that Change.org petition, or one of Amie's friends was? That's something that you guys are still trying to give, and where are you at with that?
Yeah, so there were two different petitions, and then the people who were doing that kind of got together and kind of worked together as a team. And then I get involved with them too. I don't know how many signatures. It was in the...
There's a lot, like 300,000, I think I saw.
It was over 500,000, actually. So in 2020, right after she died, we were very active working on this. We were making phone calls. We were getting meetings with state senators. We were trying to get with Nancy Pelosi's office. We did a lot of work in trying to get to people about changing these laws. And what happened was COVID happened, and then everything derailed. So we were working pretty hard at it, and COVID ended up derailing us. And to be honest, we have not gone back to that. We had so many meetings. But one thing that did happen is in California, in I think it was September of 2020, it might have been maybe September of 2020, there were some new anti-stalking legislation passed. And I don't know if we had influence over that. I like to think that we did. But some of that made internet stalking a crime that was suitable for getting restraining orders, and which was something that was happening to her a lot too, because before that actually would not qualify. If you were posting things online and doing all these types of harassment campaigns online, it didn't qualify for a restraining order because it wasn't a threat of death. So that did get passed, and which was something I cited when I was trying to get my restraining order, but apparently it didn't happen. But so that was one of a bunch of things that we wanted to do. But the other things were to be able to renew restraining orders more easily if you already had one, and basically set no expiration for them. If if something happened, it would be like put back in force. That was one of the biggest things that we wanted to do. But
yeah, it just sounds silly. Like, I feel like if you wanted, it would make more sense to make the person go and get the restraining order taken away rather than it expiring. Why would it ever go bad if
all of the work is on the victim? All of the work. Like, the victim takes all the abuse, and then they have to go through all of the paperwork, gather all of the evidence, and make their case to the court that they deserve this. And the person that's abusing them literally has to do nothing. I mean, except deny it. They just don't. No burden is placed upon them, and they're the ones that are actually committing this.
Tell us about the memorial you're trying to create for Amie's legacy.
So, right after she died, and after I got back from the funeral, we were talking. I was talking to her parents at the funeral, and it was a big funeral. There were like over 700 people came. It was an open casket funeral, and our parents had told me that they never would have done this funeral the way it is. They would have had her cremated because they would have assumed she would have wanted to be cremated. However, 2 weeks prior, she called them and said that if I ever die, I want to have an open casket funeral, and I want to have an elaborate headstone and give them all these like specifications. So they were kind of like, she called us a couple of weeks ago and told us how to do all this. And now,
oh my God, that just gave me the chills. That's so sad. And
the cemetery, which is close to her parents' house, they don't allow elaborate headstones. So then I was like, I think she would have liked to be buried in California, Hollywood Forever, which was a cemetery, where all the famous people are, and a place that she'd like to go to. So, in fact, the night after she died, on a sign near Hollywood Forever, her image, it was actually a photograph I had taken of her was turned into street art and spray painted on a sign outside of Hollywood Forever, just her face, basically her like portrait, which kind of like I think was, fitting. Dave Navarro did that actually.
Oh, okay.
So, so I think everyone would agree that like Hollywood Forever would be a good place for her. So then after I came back, I went to Hollywood Forever and met with them. And we talked about like, what it would take to get a plot and build a memorial, but not actually have someone buried there. And they said yes. So I started working on this kind of project where I wanted to build a bronze statue of Amie, but also with a kind of memorial plaque as a memorial for victims of domestic violence. Because there isn't really one in America. There's a little this and a little that. But I wanted to make something that was just like very grand, very impressive, something that just made it, just put it in your face a little more. But it would be Amie in a bronze statue in the guise of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and basically have a memorial plaque, two memorial plaques, one to her and then one to victims of domestic violence worldwide or in America. I'm not sure. I'm working on the text for that. So anyway, and then I started raising money for it. It's going to take a lot of money. Making a bronze statue is not cheap, but the most expensive thing is actually the plots in Hollywood Forever. So, we've got a ways to go, but we've been raising money. People have been donating, and I'm hoping to this week shoot a video just to talk about it more. But the strategy is to make a 3D model of her and the monument. I actually have 3D scans of her that were done while she was alive. I know some people have a studio that they specialize in making models for films and so forth. So she went and got scanned. So we have her 3-dimensional image. We just need to build the rest of the body. That would all be built 3D, and then it would be 3D printed using a printer that makes wax. So it wouldn't be life size because there are limits of the height of memorials there, but it'd be like 4.5 feet high to be put on a granite base, printed in wax, and then cast in bronze, and then put in place. And my feeling is I'm just going to keep raising money until we get there. It's kind of like my mission. So that's something I'm working on.
Where can people go to donate to this statue?
There's a website. It's called Amie Harwick Memorial, and that tells you about the project. There's a GoFundMe link on there, which is where we're taking money, but we also take checks and stuff like that. But that's kind of how we're doing it right now. So, so that's kind of something I'm focusing on. I really focused on it in 2021, and then just gearing up for the trial and everything. It's just been I don't know, it's been intense. So I kind of just let it go for a while, and now this year I'm gonna really push through.
Yeah, I mean, you've been through a lot. It's your best friend dies, and then the pandemic happened the next 2 weeks later or something. It just all that craziness. So, yeah. And then the trial. It's just give yourself a break. You're doing good. Yeah. You're doing a good thing for her.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to finish it because I just want it finished. Also, I want to see it. So I have all the vendors lined up and everything. I just always need to raise the money and get it made. But I want to finish it because I want a place for people here in California and her friends that can go and pay a little homage or what have you. And some of our friends do go out to Pennsylvania to her grave there too. So.
Well, thanks so much for sharing her story with us today. Is there anything else you'd like to let us know?
I don't know. I think
you've told us so much. This was great, and I think it's really good for people to listen to this, even if they're in the situation themselves, that this happened to a real person, or if they have friends or family in this situation. Do you have any advice that you'd offer to people that have friends that are in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, these types of situations they're more serious than you think. When your friend's going through a thing and they maybe are telling you a little of this and that, they're probably not telling you all of how bad it is. And that is, I think, how friends can sometimes overlook when people are in bad situations and not see it as what an emergency it probably is. Because I think a lot of times people in abusive relationships underplay the seriousness of their fear, the seriousness of the situation to their friends, because they know better. They know they're in a bad situation, and it's maybe also a little self-preservation that they're just trying to convince themselves it's maybe not as bad as they think. But I think that if you know someone that's in an abusive relationship, being able to offer them help in the form of helping them set up ways to escape that situation by you can come stay with me, I can help you get new bank accounts, because financial control, obviously, in a lot of domestic situations is a big part of the problem too. That was not, in Amy's case, not the case. But financial control often is what keeps people stuck. They have kids and this person has all the money control or tied up and they don't know how to get out of it. It's a difficult situation. But there are helplines for this. And on the Amie Harwick Memorial website, I have all the numbers there, and I totally don't remember them off the top of my head, but maybe you can add them somewhere. But there are hotlines for people who are in abusive situations that they can call and talk to professionals who deal with these types of situations all the time that can provide counseling, advice, and suggestions on how to deal with their specific circumstance. And I think reaching out for professional help is the best thing to do. You should reach out to your friends, but your friends should be able to tell you about getting some professional assistance too, because I think it's important to have that backup. But all that said, your friends are your first line of defense. Your friends are the people that can shelter you right away. Your friends are the people that can help you, get on your own feet and away from the person that's doing this. And also, the police can't save you. The police come to investigate after a crime. They don't come before the crime. So I think it's also important to, learn some self-defense classes and just always be prepared and always have one eye open when you're in these types of situations. You don't want to live your life in fear. And Amie would not have done that. She did not live her life in fear. She lived her life to the fullest, because if she did, that would be another win for him, that he could abuse her and then she would just be miserable and hide from the world. You don't want to do that. But at the same time, you do want to be mindful of your surroundings, be mindful of, possible things that can happen, and just always be prepared, because you just don't know.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And again, thanks so much for talking with us about this. We know it's hard for you to talk about this, but it's been really informative. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.